Alright, shalom YouTube. So in this video what I want to do is I want to encompass what the purpose of my website is. Now originally when it was created, and it still is, the full intent in that aspect is to promote the truth of Messianic Judaism, to give everybody a little bit of clarity into the dynamics of everything, dynamics of history, dynamics of how everything changed and what have you, going through actual literal history and what have you, the various aspects of what secular culture is trying to permeate, which is assessing what happened in Egypt and what have you, the Egyptians and everything else in that accord, and giving everybody the true dynamics of what true Christianity is. Because again, Christianity hasn't been Christianity for the last 1700 years, ever since Constantine changed the Sabbath to Sunday, which is the literal day to worship the sun, which he took that from the Egyptians, whom took it from the Babylonians, right? So when he did that, he broke two of the 10 commandments, which is no other gods before me and the weekly Sabbath, right? And going to Babylon, Nimrod was worshipped as the sun god Baal. Semiramis, his wife, was worshipped as Ishtar, the queen of heaven, and their son Tammuz was worshipped as Nimrod's reincarnation, as considering he was born after the death of Nimrod, and he was considered to be the sun god Baal as well, right? And I'll have to validate it historically and what have you, at least in context, but I believe that Tammuz and his mother had relations with each other. His mother, Semiramis, was considered again to be Ishtar, the queen of heaven, otherwise known as possibly the moon goddess, goddess of fertility and what have you. So all that's going to be documented when I have everything up and running. I am working on the legal aspect of everything at the moment, because I see in our current secular system where the government should be protecting our rights, the government is not protecting our rights, that they're not doing their job. That would be the police, that would be the judges and what have you. There's a lot of attacks on Christianity, and I can understand that to a degree on the modern Christian dynamic, given you see what's being taught in schools and what have you, in the public education system about the Crusades and the wars between the Abrahamic faiths and everything else, the various dynamics, and I happen to agree. It was kind of like stupid, right? And you see the same thing going on permeating today with Hamas versus the state of Israel, not the people of Israel, the state of Israel. And yes, they do want to exterminate the Ashkenazi or Orthodox Jews, but I also understand dynamics a little bit more thoroughly based on the fact that, again, being a Messianic Jew and what have you, and I'm more affiliated with Black Hebrew Israelites, that the Orthodox Jews aren't actually Jews. They stem off the line of Ashkenaz. So if you go to the book of Genesis and what have you, where it talks about the three sons of Noah, in other words, Ham, Japheth, and Shem, you'll see from the lineage of Japheth comes Ashkenaz. That's why they're called Ashkenazi Jews. And if you want to understand the true dynamics of history, then you'd understand that the actual Israelites came from Shem's line, not Japheth's line. And that's it. I mean, very simple clarification of that is look at the term anti-Semitic. It should be actually anti-Shemitic, right? Because they came from Shem's line, not Japheth's line. So a lot of the people like the Hamas and what have you, and the Arab nation or the Ishmaelites and what have you, they understand that it's been bastardized. That's why they go up against modern Christians, and that's why they also likewise go up against the Orthodox Jews, because they understand that dynamic, right? That they aren't following what's in their Quran, which correlates more with what's in the Torah, and they understand likewise that the Orthodox Jews, aka Ashkenazi Jews, don't follow the Torah, right? And they understand the context of where they're sinning, so to speak, and that's why you have all this alienation, aggravation, oppression, and what have you going on, because they understand that dynamic. If you look at history again, it'll be eventually on my website. Ham went down to Africa, Japheth went over to Europe, right? And then you had Shem's line that went over to Asia, right? So I didn't even understand until more recently that Joe Biden wanted to proclaim himself to be a Zionist. And if you look at that Zionist movement and what have you, they don't have to be observant Jews and what have you, which is true Judaism, right? And if they're following the Torah, anybody can be grafted in. Look at what the Catholics would consider to be Saint Ruth. Her name was Ruth, but Ruth was Gentile born, Gentile raised. She married a Israelite, right? And her husband died. And when her husband died, she followed Naomi back to Israel, right, where Boaz redeemed her. But the person that was supposed to redeem her, the Israelite, shunned her. He was saying that, well, she's not Israelite born and what have you, and she's basically, he was racist, is what it is. He was more concerned about the heredity of the nation rather than the fact that they're there to teach everybody. And that said, he didn't want to redeem her, so Boaz redeemed her. And in process of redeeming her, he was able to validate to the other Israelite that he was the one that was actually transgressing the laws of Yahweh, because instead of redeeming her as what he should have done, he was in turn shunning her. So they played their little game with him to where she was getting a portion of what he said Israel should be getting, and which she should get because she was the wife of Boaz at the time, but he wasn't aware of that. And when he was trying to call her out for that and what have you, she was able to shun him in turn because it became known that she was Boaz's wife, right? And therefore entitled to what she was receiving. So that's where that comes into play. And if you look at the heredity of everything, going back to YahShua from the New Testament, look at his lineage, you'll see that Boaz and Ruth are part of his ancestors. So that said, it's not a matter of heredity. You go to John 4:22, it states quite clearly that salvation is of the Jews. You go to Romans 2, it states quite clearly that, and read the whole chapter, not just part of it. It's talking about the Jews that are disobedient to Yahweh and the Jews that are obedient to Yahweh, and Gentiles who are obedient to Yahweh versus the Gentiles that are disobedient to Yahweh, right? So basically those who follow the Jews that are disobedient to Yahweh would become children of Hashatan, no different than the Jews that are disobedient to Yahweh. Both Jews and Gentiles that are disobedient to Yahweh become Gentiles, per Romans 2 is basically what it is. Become children of Hashatan. So again, it's not a matter of heredity, but at the same time, Jews or Gentiles that are obedient to Yahweh become actual Jews, right? Because again, it's not a matter of heredity, right? Because they know what the law is and they follow the law in their heart. That's why it's a matter of purification of your hearts, right? So that all said, that's where my website and the purpose is, because there's a lot of attacks on Christianity that have been going on for many, many decades, even prior to my existence. So that said, I've become increasingly more aware. I am scientifically inclined, despite the Democrat narrative that if you go up against them, then you can't be scientific if you're religious or you're creationalist. That's all propaganda that's been permeated since the 90s, and even while I was growing up, I was hearing that people were trying to proclaim that Christians were bipolar or schizophrenic and everything else. And it's like, no, bottom line is, if we're being attacked like we are openly and blatantly by people that are proclaim themselves to be just and what have you, that's not schizophrenia, that's not paranoia. That's a matter of people are legitimately attacking us. Look at what's going on with the state of Israel and Hamas, right? Look at what happened during World War II with the extermination of the Jews and what have you, right? Look at what's gone on in history to where the Christians were being exterminated, and then eventually Emperor Constantine took control of Christianity and bastardized it and paganized it. It's like, yeah, that's not a paranoid schizophrenic ideology. That's a matter of that. If you challenge the authority of people that want to proclaim themselves to be sovereign, then they're going to come after you, because the true Christianity is a matter of equality, right? So it's not a matter of that, and it's not a. And as far as the love-hate aspect of things, and basically the people that are trying to proclaim people to be bipolar and what have you because they follow it, it's like, look, you look at the aspect of everything that they do, they're permeate hate more than anything else, more than any kind of love. So they might be static in their hate, but that's why when it comes to true Christianity, it might be perceived as being bipolar to that degree, because it's a matter of, it's all supposed to be about love, and if you're pushing us and constantly pushing us, you're going to finally eventually get somebody to possibly break, and they might snap and they might hate, which is break one of the commandments, in other words. But it's still not bipolar. It's just people doing human nature things, and they can be forgiven for it. No different than the people that are statically in their hate can be forgiven for their hatred, because it's a matter of love, and that's where love conquers hate, right? The whole concept. And then you see what's going on with the hippie love movement and what have you, to where it's based on your appearance and your heredity and what you look like and your culture and everything else. and trying to segregate people through the concept of diversity. And well, you can't culturally appropriate and everything else, right? Because the bottom line is they're trying to segregate, right? Not unify, but keep everybody separate. And by keeping everybody separate, they can maintain dominance and control. That's why all these theories like evolution theory and the Big Bang theory, as much as they might seem like they're scientifically based and that they're there to permeate unity through ignorance, is what it actually is. That's what it's focused in on, a diversity of thought rather than on the concept of reality. So you look at a lot of the arguments that are scientifically based, and you'll see that there's debates on a multitude of different factors of a lot of different things. Even look at evolution theory, they'll say, well, originally we evolved from apes. Then you'll have other sects that will say that we evolved from dolphins, and that, or the dolphins were the first ones to evolve to humans, and then they went back to the sea and everything else. Watch the TV show from the 90s, the Sequest DSV, right? Same concept, right? With Darwin being the dolphin, right? So that all said, that's why you have to understand history, because if you understand history, you understand the whole context behind evolution theory isn't really based in science at all. It's based of trying to slight against the church, right? Because on the church dynamic, it's a matter of love thy neighbor as thyself and love Yahweh thy Elohim, which is the 10 commandments basically. So no murder, no theft, no coveting, no bearing false witness, and no adultery, right? That's love thy neighbor as thyself. And then you look at the other aspects of no other gods before me, don't take his name in vain, the weekly Sabbath, honor thy father, which is Yah, and mother, the elder women of the church that are obedient to Yahweh, and keep the Sabbath holy, right? So that all said, that's where a lot of people are going wrong, because they don't follow those 10 commandments. Oh, no graven images. I'm not sure if I mentioned it. I may have mentioned Sabbath twice in that accord, but no graven images is in there as well. So that all said, that's the 10 commandments. That's very simple, and it's like no worshiping stars, no worshiping moons, no worshiping anything, the frogs or blah blah blah, all these different things, right? And that's what people, that's why they're heavily against it. That's why evolution theory exists, is to try to give people the notion that, well, we came from animals, we may as well act like animals, right? So that's where that all comes from. And now go into more detail than that, because it's semi-superficial, but I'll have that documented on my website as well. Everything that I'm saying in this conversation is going to be eventually documented on my website with validation and what have you, because again, part of the aspect of the 10 commandments is not to bear false witness, right? So I'm going to substantiate that. So granted, when it comes to Yahweh, you have to, it's a matter of faith, hope, and love. And a lot of people lack faith in general. They look for evidence, like say for instance YahShua to perform miracles and what have you. So you have to have that faith, but at the same time I'm going to substantiate that a lot of the secular culture that permeates and attacks people that have faith, that's the whole reason why a lot of people don't have faith. And they also look at the Abrahamic faith, the three of them, the Ishmaelites, the modern Christians, and the Orthodox Jews and what have you, that have been consistently arguing with each other for many centuries, right? And based on that, that's why they don't like the Abrahamic faith and sway over to the scientific aspect of things. They also look at it how women and everybody else have been oppressed by modern Christians and everything else and all these different cultures, and based on the historical oppression, that's why they swing on the scientific level. But the scientific level is still nevertheless a matter of survival of the fittest. It's basically saying, well, we came from animals, we may as well act like animals, and it's a matter of how charismatic and everything else, how good looking and everything else that you are, that is going to get you whatever you want, right? Or how intelligent or what have you. It's survival of the fittest. It's a dog eat dog world, right? Is what it is what they're trying to permeate in that notion, right? And by keeping us separate in that, by attacking each other, they can have dominance and control. That would give credence to the government having authority over the people, right? So because the people are attacking each other, therefore there's a necessity for the government, and that's why they need all this funding and taxes and everything else, is to protect us from ourselves, because we're the government. Trust us. We're here to help you, You act like a bunch of animals, and we have to correct you. We have to punish you because we are the deities teaching you right from wrong, right? Instead of seeing us as the sovereign people of the nation, and so long as we're not harming anybody or their property, then they have no authority over us, right? And that's why they became corporations, and it's a for-profit business is what it is. So that's the United States of America, that's the cities and everything else. You look at it in that dynamic, that's what they're doing, right? So that's when it comes to my court case and what have you. But you can watch the police brutality videos and what have you. I asserted my rights, and they should be protecting my rights, but they didn't want to acknowledge my rights because they thought that they're the authority, that they're the teachers, that they know the law. So although I might have violated a traffic citation, a traffic law, which is civil in nature, not criminal, for it to be criminal, there has to be 1, intent, and 2, if it's criminal negligence, there has to be an actual victim. There was no victim, hence no crime, right? And likewise, there also had to be intent. So even if there is intent, there is still a matter of it's a civil infraction. It's not criminal, right? Because there is still no victim, right? Society can't be a victim. You're utilizing the law to violate the rights of the people, because if you violate the rights of the people, that is a crime. Literally. That's why I asserted my rights in that video and what have you with the police, talking about the complete separation of church and state, and they didn't want to acknowledge that because they wanted to presume that they had the authority, secular control over the church, when they don't, right? Because the law states it doesn't have that stipulation of a religious exemption. With that stipulation of a religious exemption not being there, they think that they have that authority and that level of control. However, Marbury versus Madison, anything that goes up against the constitutional standards is automatically null and void. We're the United States for a reason, which means that the states don't have sovereignty. Going back to the Articles of Confederation, right? When we were confederated, each state was had to defend itself basically against all the other states, as well as any foreign entities, right? Like the England and Spain and everything else. All these different dynamics. That's why we became the United States, where the states themselves gave up their sovereignty to become the United States, right, and ratified the United States Constitution afterwards for the defense of the nation, what have you, which basically means that that's for the whole purpose of that 10th Amendment, right, where it states whatever's not on the federal level goes to the states or the people, not exclusively to the state. So the rights of the people are still on the federal level, right? So that said, they don't have that authority. That's why in that video I said that you don't have the authority, nor do you have the jurisdiction, because even though I violated a law within their jurisdiction, within their city limits and what have you, that's still asserting my rights. And my rights, it doesn't matter if I'm in the city, county, state, or whatever I'm in, they apply to all parts of the United States. So again, as much as they might have that authority, if I were to violate a law that doesn't violate my rights, the one that they're trying to assert, the one that was an infringement on my right, and my rights are unalienable, right? Going back to the Declaration of Independence and everything else, we the people and everything else, that's what that whole point was, especially given the blatant attacks by the Democrats with trying to force people to get vaccinated and everything else against their will, and wear masks and controlling society against their will. They're not protecting anybody. They're just trying to have a certain level of sovereignty over the people rather than acknowledging the sovereignty of the people, right? When we opposed the monarchy and deposed the monarchy from the United States, from America, with the Declaration of Independence, and they fought for our freedoms during the Revolutionary War, that was the whole purpose, right, behind it. That we became the sovereign people. We became the kings and queens. We got rid of the monarchy that was full of jealousy and had their own motives and their own agenda that were violating the rights of the people, to ensure that our rights wouldn't be violated, right? So that's the whole purpose of why they fought the wars that they did, right? So to not acknowledge that is to denounce history in favor of their vanities, and they want to do the exact same things that were happening during the times of the Magna Carta, where the sheriffs and what have you, and constables and what have you, were going around and infringing on the rights of the people because they thought they had that level of authority when they didn't, right? Which is why the monarchy was being assailed back in the times of the Magna Carta, right? In the Charter of the Forest and what have you. Because they were violating the rights of the people, going all the way up the line laws of the Duke, Charter of Liberties and Privileges, and what have you. Also on my website, all this information is on the website, and I'm going to have it all sectioned out to make it quick and easily accessible so you can see quite clearly where everything's coming from. So the full documents you can download yourself and you can do the research yourself, but I'm going to pick it all apart, have it all separated out. That way it's quick and easy. You can click on a certain section of the website and there's no ads, no advertisements or anything like that on the website to try to sway you into, well, you're paying for this and everything else and I'm making money off you. No, that's not the purpose. That's not the intent. The intent is to declare our sovereignty to the government, to reassure everybody that we are the people and the government is there to protect our rights, not there to alienate our rights. They're to uphold their oath of office. It doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican, right? So I see the Democrats light on things that where the government has been too much churchy, acting like it's still the church, acting like it's still the religion of the nation, the one that is the parent to everybody. So that's why I agree on the First Amendment dynamic, that when it comes to that First Amendment, it's freedom from establishment as well as freedom of exercise, right? I haven't voted for a representative for government in over 23 years, right? Because under the First Amendment, freedom of exercise, I believe wholeheartedly in the complete separation of church and state. That said, it doesn't matter who is elected into office, they cannot violate my rights, right? Doesn't matter if they're Democrat, doesn't matter if they're Republican. If they do, they're in violation of their oath of office to the Constitution. They can be removed from their office for treason, right? So that said, so I agree on the Democrat side of things when it comes to them arguing for I don't, keep in mind, as a Christian, I'm never going to say that it's okay to be gay, but at the same time, it is the right in our country for them to be gay or to identify as they will or what have you if they want to think that they're a mushroom. Difference is if they tell me that I have to identify them as the mushroom or what have you, then that's infringement on my right, right? And that's licentious. They can't have a right over that supersedes my rights. So I'll hurt their feelings and what have you if I need to and what have you, but at the same time, I don't hate them. Just because I don't see things their way doesn't mean I don't hate them. So I get that on the Republican side too, because me going up against the modern Christians and what have you, they'll attack me no different than they would an Orthodox Jew and what have you. But again, Christians, a true Christian would be supportive of Israel. They understand that dynamic. But then you have a lot of the other modern Christians and what have you that are up against the Jews because they read the New Testament where YahShua was going up against the Jews, and they take it out of context and think that, well, all Jews are bad, but they don't acknowledge themselves where their faults lie, right? So that's the whole purpose of the website too, is to provide that level of clarity so people understand why they do what they do and what have you, going through history and what have you, how things have been changed and distorted because they don't understand that history, right? And there's a lot of things going on in society that try to cover up the truth and what have you. So I understand why modern Christians would go up against the Jews, even when it comes to Catholics and what have you, which if you actually read the Bible at all, especially the New Testament, you'll see that they do the opposite of everything that's written in the Old New Testament. Anything that YahShua said to do, they do the exact opposite of. And the same applies to the Orthodox Jews. YahShua said to do this, and they do the exact opposite because they follow the vain traditions of men, right? In the Protestant movement, they stepped away from it, and it's progressively getting better in a lot of dynamics, and that's why you have all this diversity and when it comes to modern Christianity with, like, say for instance, Jehovah's Witnesses and everything else. But to me, I don't just shun people based on whatever they believe. I look at what they believe and why they believe what they believe, right? And that helps me focus in on what the reality is, what the truth is, right? One of the main principles behind me trying to understand everything was, well, what's the interpretation of Revelations? Because if you ask most modern Christians, they don't understand what's going on in Revelations at all, right? And that me being somebody that tries to solve the mystery, well, now I know what's going on in Revelations. correlations, right? Because as a Messianic Jew, I see the correlation between Colossians 2:16-17, right, where it says, "Let no man judge you in regards to meat, drink, or Sabbath, or holy day, and what have you." And that's because the Sabbath and the holy days and what have you have been distorted and rearranged. And in modern society, they call them holidays. Not holy days, holidays, right? That's them acting like they're the church. Go even to the executive code for New York State and what have you, to where the governor is given the authority to create whatever holiday that they want, right? And they have fasting and prayer and everything on that day. That's no separation of church and state when it comes to that dynamic, is there, right? And that's something that's still going on in today's society. You have like the permeation of as much as a lot of people probably hate me for it, Christmas, right? Christmas, and people have known this for many, many decades, maybe, it has no affiliation with YahShua at all, right? That's why a lot of people were calling it Xmas and everything else, and because they didn't want to believe in Christ or whatever, but they wanted the days off and the holidays and everything else, right? But they weren't openly trying to say, well, you shouldn't be observant of Christmas at all. They're just saying, well, let's call it Xmas and everything else because it's been commercialized, right? And Christmas actually celebrates the birth of Tammuz from Babylon. It has nothing to do with Yeshua, right? So, because Tammuz was born on December 25th, not Yeshua. So when it comes to Easter, same concept. It sounds like Easter for a reason because it celebrates Ishtar, or aka Semiramis. That's why you have a lot of rabbits during that time frame that celebrates Easter, because she was the goddess of fertility and breeding like rabbits, right? That's the whole concept behind it. And a lot of people don't understand that dynamic, and because they fail to acknowledge that dynamic, they don't know what's going on. So that's why a lot of things are going on in society, that because it's a matter, they perceive it as being the state acting like it's a church and giving favor to secular Christians, what it is, pagans, but they don't understand that it's pagans versus pagans is what it is. Devils trying to rebuke devils, right? So I understand that dynamic, and that the dynamics of history that most don't. And again, this is all going to be on the website. A lot of it might already be, but I'm going to substantiate and validate it thoroughly. That way people can understand the true dynamics. And that's me going through the Charter of Privileges and liberties and what have you, and all these laws of the Duke and everything else. I've already done it for the most part, considering I was going to utilize it in my court case, and I don't know where that stands at this present point, other than they are still trying to send me a letter last I knew. But even that said, I reported everything as it was happening to the Federal Division of Civil Rights that deals with our rights on the federal level, which eventually goes over to the FBI, as much as I don't really care so much for the FBI as much as I want to be a FBI agent, going back to the X-Files and what have you back in the day, investigator, loving doing that investigating and looking at mysteries and what have you. I was into the Hardy Boys and everything else, right? Avid lover of mysteries and crime detection and figuring out things out. I'll look at what serial killers and what have you do. And you can watch my life. And if you had a camera and watched everything that I do, you'd see that I live a very boring lifestyle, right? Nothing to hide, nothing to conceal from anybody, right? But nevertheless, it's a matter of principle. So that's why I'm doing everything I'm doing, and I'm asserting everything I'm asserting, because most people don't understand. That's why YahShua himself said that when he was being persecuted, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do," right? That's the whole purpose of a true Christian, is being able to take it on the cheek and turn the other cheek, right? Because the truth has been so heavily bastardized that people don't know what's going on, right? And they're easily led astray from the truth, and they, based on looking at what modern Christians might have you do, that is permeating the hate out of their hypocrisy. But likewise, they themselves are hypocrites, right? So you have a lot of secular culture trying to call out hypocrisy, but they don't acknowledge the fact that they are hypocrites in and of themselves, right? And that's what I'm doing in this rebuking devils. Maybe that's what the whole point of me having that confrontation, so to speak, with the police was. It wasn't a matter of I hated the police, or maybe if you watch my TikTok videos just prior, I was asserting the exact same principle. If I get pulled over for anything, I'm going to probably assert my rights, where I haven't done it before historically based on the attacks that are going on in Christianity. So as much as they want to try to claim that what I did was irrational, it was actually deliberate and intentional, right? Especially given all the attacks on Christianity. It had nothing to do with the police or what have you, because they're the grunts, so to speak, bottom level chain of command in regards to things, and they're being taught themselves inaccurate things to give them the impression that they have the authority, and they have the authority to provide lawful commands. But if they're violating the rights of people, it's not a lawful command, it's a criminal activity, right? That's why I called 911. That's why I provided during the 911 call my full legal name as well as my driver's license number and what have you, to validate the very principle that they were criminal in action. It was a civil action that they're escalating over to a criminal action for failure to identify Penal Code 195.05. However, they neglected the fact that in process of doing everything that they're doing, given I was trying to assert my Christian name, and hence the other dynamics of true Christianity, such as rebuking devils, to have respect to persons, is to commit sin, what have you, and the blasphemy from the civil action, because again, it was a matter of my right. Anything that's repugnant to the United States Constitution is automatically null and void per Marbury versus Madison, as you can see in those videos. But likewise, when it comes to the Ten Commandments, anything that's contrary to is irrational in nature. As much as they wanted to see that I was being irrational because I was in violation of their law, keep in mind that's that secular mentality. They're acting like they're the church, right? And they're trying to instill the law. I am the biblical law, follow the biblical law, and I enforce biblical law. So it's law enforcement versus law enforcement is basically what it is. And the church and the state are like oil and water. We don't mix, right? So that said, that's why everything happened the way it did, despite as much as they wanted to say, well, you're irrational as some 30 psychophile on the pretense that something could have happened. Nothing did happen. There was no victim, there was no crime. So they don't have justification. That's utilizing conjecture to mitigate my rights, and they can't do that. They can't mitigate my rights under any condition, right? That's the primary purpose of the police in every state, is to ensure our rights, to protect our rights, to serve and to protect. They are not the authority, right? So unless I'm causing harm to person or property, they shouldn't be involved in my interactions with anybody at all, right? If anything, they should be focusing on the corporations that are violating the rights of the people on a constant daily basis, especially given the dynamic of the whole public education system we have, where the rights of the people are being pushed under the rug at a young age, and we're taught a lot of stupid things that aren't accurate to keep us submissive to the state, to give them that level of authority. And then when you get out of school, then they want to exert that same level of authority and want to think that you're just there to work for them and you're a slave to the system. Which is why I would agree with the Democrats on that dynamic, because that's what you are. You're trained in school to be submissive to your corporate employers, right? That's what it is. That's what they're training you to be, as a slave. Somebody that is just there to give the state money rather than the state there to protect our rights. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic, right? So that's where that all comes from. That's why I'm asserting these rights. And that's why in this particular video, I'm going to have all the links to the website, to my social media accounts, TikTok and what have you, directly. I did put it a little bit on the website, ways to contact me and what have you. And keep in mind that if you do try to contact me, if it's not in regards to what's going on or what have you, then I'm not going to probably respond to it. If you're trying to sell me a product or service or anything like that, go ahead, that's your objective, but I'm not here to buy things from anybody. I'm here to teach people things. So that's why I don't even sell anything on my website. I haven't created a store or anything like that on TikTok or anything like that and selling merchandise and what have you, because it's not a matter of putting money in my pocket. I can do work and I can obtain my own money. And same when it comes to the court system and what was going on. If I wanted to, I could very easily sue for millions of dollars, many millions of dollars, right? Because they violated a multitude of my rights. Go to my website and that validates that. I go in full detail under the religious freedom asserting my rights section of it, going through everything that happened in police interaction, the videos that validate that they were violating my rights, and that the police officer's statement was made under penalty of perjury was inaccurate. He perjured himself. It was an official misconduct, grounds for impeachment, hate crimes, and what have you. That'll all be correlated, as well as the links into how to get in contact with the various dynamics of the different divisions of the state and what have you, as well as the Federal Division of Civil Rights and the FBI and everything else in regards to hate crimes. Because again, they're going up against you, even if you're a modern Christian, they're not allowed to. You have that freedom of speech under the First Amendment. So even though what you're saying is inaccurate, that is your right under the First Amendment if you have a firm belief in what you're believing. Same with everything else, but at the same time, as being a true Christian, you're causing a lot of people under Romans 2 to hate true Christianity. So you might want to start looking in the mirror than anything else. So that's where I agree with the Democrat side of things. You need to start looking in the mirror and seeing where you're going wrong. Because again, on a true biblical level, it's a matter of globalism, but it's not Freemason globalism. It's not socialism under a Marxist dynamic or anything else. It's a matter of Christians, or rather the Israelites, are supposed to be in charge of the world, but based on their disobedience to Yahweh, they were constantly being shunned and put into diaspora for being disobedient to Yahweh. And that's why we have the state of affairs in the world today, where you have all these different secular cultures arguing with each other under the pretense that they know more and they know better, and they're acting like deities, acting like they're sovereign, acting like they're the parents, when the people just don't understand, and they're keeping them in the dark, right? Want to proclaim that the medieval church and what have you was us living in the dark ages. We haven't really left the dark ages, right? Going back to Romans 2, it's a matter of leading by example, be the light of the world, right? Because the world is in darkness. They don't know what the truth is, right? So the medieval church was living in darkness, but at the same time, you think that secular society currently, with evolution theory and the Big Bang theory and wavy, is any better? It's just them trying to keep everybody in the dark, the same level of everything that has happened historically. And you can see, especially looking at the scientific principles behind the naming conventions of everything that they do, it's Latin derived. And what is the medieval church, the Catholic Church, notorious for doing is speaking in Latin and doing everything in Latin, right? Not in the original Greek, not in the canonic Greek, or not in the Hebrew or way of the true context of the Bible. They do everything in Latin, right? Because they want to have that level of authority and control over the people where they don't have it. And that's why I understand what the state nationals and the sovereign citizens are doing, and I support them wholeheartedly, because again, if there is no victim, there is no crime, and the state is trying to exert authority that it never was given. And that's why even on the website I have the Federalist Papers, I have the Articles of Confederacy, I have everything there that's going to be, and I'm constantly updating it and what have you, putting a lot of information. I'm separating it out so you don't have to sift through the documents yourself. Civil rights code and everything else, and then eventually, as soon as I'm done with New York State, then I'll eventually go to the other states. I'll have the other states' constitutions, I'll break them down, I'll have all their different codes and how it correlates and everything, and I'll have it separated out to where, well, if it's certain rights that you're trying to assert, I'll have it all broken down per state level, where all the different codes, all the different laws, all the different aspects of the constitutions and everything else, and how it all correlates to get rid of people like CPS and what have you from having rights, exerting rights over the people that they don't have, right? Because that's the whole point of CPS, is when you're asserting your rights with your children, you're trying to raise your own children to live a certain lifestyle and what have you. They want to utilize CPS to remove them from your ability to teach them. Because, oh, well, you're teaching them hate and everything else, and you're correcting them. We should be the ones that are correcting them. We should be the ones that are punishing them. And we're going to punish you because we're the ultimate parent, when no, supreme sovereignty is in the people, right? They're exerting authority that they're never given in the Constitution. and they're trying to utilize administrative courts and administrative departments and what have you to violate our rights, and that's, in my dynamic, that's a hate crime, right? Messianic Jew and what have you, that's literally a hate crime. They can't do that. Especially if you look at when it comes to CPS and everything else, all these different departments and what have you, and divisions, right? That their whole primary objective, say for instance, if they're removing children from my home, under my religion, they are living under my religious principles, right? The Bible and what have you, and the true dynamic of it. Then if they remove the children from my home, they have to try to find a place that will take the children in that follow the same principles, right? So if the principle is to punish them, like spanking them and what have you, for being disobedient to me, then here comes the state that's acting like they're my parent, right? So I could understand it if I murdered somebody or what have you, to where that would come into play, right? Because I'm violating other laws that are a violation of Yahweh's laws, right? Then obviously the children have to be taken away from me and what have you, because I'm violating Yahweh's laws, right? But at the same time, it's a matter of it's devil trying to rebuke a devil kind of concept, where they still shouldn't have that level of authority. But at the same time, I understand that I am not teaching my children proper Christian values, right? So that's where I would concede to that, based on the fact that I'm not teaching my children proper Christian values, and I need to do better. And because of my disobedience to Yahweh, then that's what's causing that whole dynamic under Deuteronomy 28, where they have that authority to take away my children, right? Because if we violate Yahweh's laws and what have you, that's what gives them that level of authority over us. That's why it's a matter of purification of the heart over everything else, and trying to assert his divinity, because that's what has given them that leeway to have a certain level of authority, and they're extending their authority based on our disobedience to Yahweh. So by being obedient to Yahweh, they don't deserve our respect, what have you. They are not the authority. We are the sovereigns. We are the ones that are in charge of them. And again, going with the sovereign citizens and state-national dynamic, they don't have that authority. There is no victim, there is no crime, right? So they try to utilize it for various other dynamics of religion and what have you, which it's like, yeah, I understand that. I understand, especially looking at some of the historical judgments and what have you, when it came to, say for instance, Indian tribe or Indian people that were using drugs or what have you, and they were fired from their jobs because they were considered to be a safety risk or what have you. But to me, you know what, it's like, I've worked a number of jobs and a lot of various dynamics to where people are, trust me, under the influence, right? Either of drugs or alcohol or what have you, and they're working side by side with me, and they weren't causing injury or harm to anybody and what have you. They may have not have been doing things that were completely sound, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, that it's whatever kind of situation. And yes, it could lead to injury, it could lead to harm, no different than traffic rule, right? Traffic law. If I were to have done that in a different situation where I could have caused actual harm to somebody, I understand that dynamic. But the pretense of safety can be utilized to mitigate the rights of the people, right? Because that is a matter of public health, safety, and welfare, and what have you, for the public good is our rights. That's the primary assessment, primary job and duties of the government, is to protect our rights. So they can't utilize pretense to have authority. That would be New York State Civil Rights Code, Section 2, supreme sovereignty in the people. No authority under any pretense whatsoever can be exercised over the citizens of the state without consent of the people, which basically, again, means our rights supersede state authority, right? Because we don't live in a confederacy. The states don't have sovereignty. The 10th Amendment didn't give the states exclusive rights, as much as they want to try to proclaim that it did, but it states quite clearly to the state or the people, and our rights are on the federal level, right? And they try to utilize the 11th Amendment to justify having complete sovereignty and sovereign immunity and absolute authority when they don't. Because the 11th Amendment just stipulates that any foreign nation or person from a foreign state, from one of the other states, in other words, can't sue the state in their official capacity for violating the rights or anything else, but they can still sue the municipality, right? Because the municipality doesn't have the immunity, the state does. So, and the state that's where the people are going wrong with that dynamic, because they think that the state, with them proclaiming that immunity, they can't go make basically what it's saying is without their permission you can't sue the state. But in this accord, you can sue the municipality, right? That's the other dynamic that they're missing out on. You got to sue the municipality, right? The city. Sue the city, right? You don't need the city's permission. You don't need the county's permission. You're going to go after whatever the municipality is if they're violating your rights in that dynamic, because they have to uphold their oath of office to the Constitution as well. So in most cases, when it comes to the police officers or what have you infringing on their rights, unless they're a state police officer, then yeah, you definitely want to go in against the municipality, right? That's where you don't need the permission from the government, because it's the municipality's job and duty to ensure that the police officers are trained and uphold their oath of office to the Constitution. You can also likewise go up against the officers themselves, the judges themselves. Judges don't have sovereign immunity. If they violate your right in the court of law, that is grounds for impeachment under New York State law, Penal Code 195.00, official misconduct. That's grounds for impeachment, let alone the other crimes that they did in process of violating your rights, right? CPS, family court, anything like that. Assert your rights. Now, in the state dynamic, I mean, when they violate your rights like that, you can report it to the FBI. I would recommend that you do. File a complaint with the Federal Division of Civil Rights, and if need be, contact the FBI directly. That way they can perform an investigation that is not on the police dynamic, right? So as much as the Democrats are trying to push the FBI, and well, you have to keep in mind that they're trying to use the Fed against us, right? And the FBI had their affiliation with Facebook and everything else, but it is literally the job of the FBI and all these different government agencies, the Justice Department in particular, to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. So if they receive a report that a citizen in any respective state and their rights have been violated under the United States Constitution, it is their job to protect and defend the United States Constitution. And if they get wind of it, that they have that your rights have been violated, and they don't do their due diligence to investigate the situation and to prosecute accordingly if need be, then they're guilty of treason, or misprision of treason, rather, right? Which is a crime too, because they became aware of a crime. They didn't contact the magistrate or the Justice Department or the various justices and what have you, various judges, in other words, to report the crime, and that's the misprision of treason, right? So they're complicit with the crime, right? Same with the state police and what have you. So if you're arguing you're going to do it on the state dynamic, make sure that you're reporting everything to the state police and what have you. That way the state police can go after the city and what have you. Use the government against the government. That would be your primary objective. Make sure you're filing your complaints accordingly in the proper avenues and going through that channel. They have the government attack the government. That's why you don't have to sue the government directly, because they have the government sue itself. They should be filing tort claims and everything else to recover your damages occurred to you and everything else for them violating different branches of the government, violating your rights. Use the government against the government. Don't attack the government directly. Have the government go up against the government, right? Because if you go up against the government, then you're going to be having a multitude of lawyers and everything else that are coming up against you. Whereas if you use the government directly, they're the ones that can get all these different records, subpoenas and everything else, file all these charges and everything else, and they don't have to have court filing fees or anything like that. Even the Attorney General and the Governor of the state can get involved in that situation, because the Governor should be enforcing the laws of the state, right? And they still have an oath of office to support the United States Constitution as well as the state Constitution. And it's why you want to make sure that you're aware of your rights under your state constitution, what have you. So when you're going into court on a state level, make sure you have all your state codes, all your state penal codes, all your state executive codes, all your state civil rights codes, all your state judiciary codes, and what have you. Understand how you can remove a judge from their position legally without having to utilize force or violence or what have you. Remove them from their position for violating their oath of office. Impeach them, because they're only judges if they're judges in good standing, right? You don't have to utilize force. You can do it peacefully. You can do it legally. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're researching everything, and that's why, like I said, I'm providing everything on my website to make it quick and easy, right? It's not me providing legal assistance or legal advice or anything like that. I can provide legal assistance from what I gather, but to me, it's just freedom of information, right? Taking all the executive codes and everything else, compiling it there. If you want to grab it and use it for your advantage and what have you, if you want to give it to the lawyer that's representing you and what have you, if that's the way you want to go about doing things, if you want to find a sovereign citizen or what have you that is going to assist you and represent you, or rather assist you in the court of law, because it should be a matter of assisting you, assistance of counsel, not representation of counsel, right? So make sure that you're asserting your rights in a proper fashion. That way you don't have to utilize force and what have you, and get yourself in trouble in process. Because if you utilize force, you're basically committing treason in and of itself, right? Look at historically what happened with John Brown. John Brown was a Republican. He was a prominent Protestant, prominent abolitionist, utilized force to obtain his objective of abolition, and was tried and convicted of treason accordingly and executed due to that. And because of that, that's why a lot of black people in modern society have the last name of Brown out of admiration, not because they're slaves to the Browns, right? So that's where a lot of people, again, they have a lot of misconceptions and what have you, and going back to everything that the Democrat narrative and what have you, this has been going on for many decades with Freemasons, and the Freemasons support the Democrats support the KKK, and instilling Jim Crow laws, and that's still things that they're doing today. Freemasons created a public education system, everything else. It's a matter of mitigating the rights of the people to have a secular, socialist society, Marxist society, the whole Great Reset agenda. So hopefully this video, I mean, it went a lot longer than what I entailed, but this video is here just primarily to provide you all the links to my website and all the information that you need to help you in whatever court case you might have or what have you, CPS, FBI, versus whatever it is. That way it's all at your disposal, including the United States codes and what have you, breaking it down, the various treason aspects like Title 18, Section 2381 through 2385, and then Title 18, Section 241, Title 18, Section 242, I think it's 913, and as well as 912, also under Title 18, Title 5, Section 3331, which is their oath of office to protect and defend the United States Constitution, and what have you. A lot of various dynamics, Title 42, Section 1983, as well as 1985, for civil action for them violating your rights. So yeah, it's time to put them in check and remind them that you are public servants who are here to serve and protect. Doesn't matter whatever Supreme Court case was that decided in your favor, what have you. If you're violating our rights, that is a crime, and we can put you in the same prisons and what have you that you want to put everybody else in, where I'm sure that they would love nothing more than to play with the popo that want to violate the rights of the people. So